Welcome back to the Profits on Purpose podcast, which is the podcast for ecom and CPG founders who are looking to scale their businesses both profitably and purposefully. I'm your host, Nate Littlewood from Future Ready CFO, where I help seven-figure ecom and CPG founders make confident, data-backed decisions that drive profitable growth, and at the same time, help them sleep better at night. Anyway, today's guests are Scott Turner and Nick Lagonia, who are the co-founders of Dawnbreaker Oats. What I find really compelling and interesting about this story is the raw honesty that these guys are willing to share about what it actually takes to build a CPG brand from scratch. After raising over $300,000 and spending a couple of years in the trenches, these guys made the bold decision a little while back to completely rebrand the entire company. They completed this transition in just 7 weeks, rebuilding everything from the ground up on hard-won lessons about product market fit, consumer testing, and what actually drives purchase decisions. In this conversation, we're going to be talking about some of the expensive mistakes that they made with things like influencer marketing and agencies early on. We're going to be talking about some of the operational nightmares of minimum order quantities and why sometimes the thing that you think is your brand strength is actually what's getting in the way of your success. Scott, Nick, welcome to the show. It's great to have you guys here.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. Well, guys, I usually like to get these conversations started with talking a little bit about the origin story and the background of how you guys got started. Quickly and high level, how did you guys get into the oats business, and how did the two of you come to be working together on this project?
Yeah, so Nick and I met in 2016 working at Peloton, and Nick worked on the content side. I worked on the IT and tech side of the business, and just became friends in the office, and then started going to the gym together and getting dialed in at the gym. Obviously nutrition is a really important part of training. It's something that you're focused on all the time. And kind of a go-to meal before or after a workout is protein oatmeal, because you're getting a good energy source through the oats and the carbs that come with that, and then layering that in with protein. It's filling. It's something that you need. It helps you reach your macro goals, and if you're trying to build muscle, it's just kind of a no-brainer. And so Nick and I, had been making our own concoctions for a long time. And they're passable, right? They're like good enough, but not really something that you'd be super excited to eat every single morning unless you want to take like 10-15 minutes to make it and add everything that you want. And so when we'd go to the grocery store to look for something that was already made, the options just weren't really jumping out at us from a nutritional standpoint. You had a lot of sugar, different products would have protein oatmeal on the front, and then they'd only have like 10 grams of protein, which felt kind of lackluster. I might as well go just choose another food to consume that inherently has more protein. So, after a few years of kind of sitting on this idea, we really looked around and said, hey, there's not a lot of innovation in this space. Why don't we just make this the way that we've been making it, but try to improve it drastically so that other people actually want to eat it, and it's convenient and easy, and it has the macros and the nutritional quality that consumers today are actually looking for. So that's kind of the summary of how we met and how we got started.
When you transition from this being, hey, an interesting idea and thing that we can chat about in the gym, to getting to the point where you're like, okay, no, this needs to be a real company and we need to work on it. How did that transition happen?
Yeah, so I had been sitting on this idea personally for about 5 years. Nick and I, when we worked together and we're like working out together, like we had thrown around this idea of starting a company together. We threw around a couple of ideas, but the protein oatmeal specifically is something that starting in like 2019, I actually began to look into. And then 2020, I don't want to say I took a stab at it, but I like called a recipe developer and kind of, it's one of those things where I just did a little discovery work and then tabled it again.
Yeah.
And then 2021 comes around. I kind of do the same thing, but this time I buy a domain for it had a completely different name and all this stuff. And then 2023 comes around, and I've been working in tech for about 8 years at this time, and I just got married. Nick had just gotten married. We've stayed in touch through the years, and kind of came to a point where I said, if I don't do this now and I don't actually take it seriously, I'm probably never going to do this. I'm content with where I'm at in my career. I'm not super pumped about the work that I'm doing all the time. I want to do something that's a little bit more involved, that I'm a little bit more passionate about. And this protein oatmeal had always been in the background. And I knew that if there was one person that I could do this with, it was Nick. I didn't really consider anyone else, to be honest, because we know each other as coworkers first and then friends, and we've kind of maintained our relationship around fitness and all this stuff. And again, we've worked together. So I basically called Nick, and I had this slide deck, and it was like, there's a white space in this market. There's a gap here. Oatmeal has no innovation. It's the same brands for the last, 20, 30 plus years, or at least 90% of the market is. And said like, hey man, are you down to like really give this a try with me? I don't know what I'm doing. We both don't know what we're doing. We've never run a CPG company. Like let's just make an Excel spreadsheet with tasks and dates. And, this is like kind of right. This is pre-chat GBT. So it was kind of like, all right, man, like let's figure out a name and start working on the brand. And then let's just Google, like, how do you get protein oatmeal made commercially? And anyway, I could tell you the entire story from there, but that's really how it started. I mean, I've wanted to start this company for a really long time, and it just like push came to shove, and it was like, hey, we're married, we're probably going to have some kids soon, like let's start working on this now, because all of a sudden 10, 15 years is going to go by, and I'm going to wish that I at least tried. So
yeah, I hear you. Once you get the itch, it's hard not to scratch it, I guess.
Yeah.
And we moved quick too. It's fun. He nailed that. Like he showed me the deck. And I was like, let me just give this a second. He caught me like at the perfect time. Literally, like I think it was like 1 hour later. I was like, all right, I'm all in. So it really
let's do it.
This wasn't like a 2 week. Like I don't know. It was like, nah, let's do it.
I love it. Okay. Well, Scott, you touched on this just a moment ago. And in fact, when I first met you guys, you were operating under a very different brand and brand name to what you are now. So today you're Dawnbreaker Oats. Back then it was Misery and Mayhem. And the, vibe and look of the whole company was completely different. We spoke a little while back about the pivot and what triggered that, and from my perspective, the incredibly quick timeline through which you kind of executed all that. Let's talk about what happened. How did you know there was a branding problem here, and how the heck did you go through this transformation so quickly?
Yeah, so Misery and Mayhem was, we came up with the name like 2 weeks after that initial phone call, or maybe even less. And it was built to be an homage to Nick and I's workouts that kind of forged our friendship. And working out in this basement gym in Manhattan, and we're doing these super strenuous workouts, and Nick went through like an incredible transformation during that time, and all of this stuff. And so, we launched the company in February of 2025 under Misery and Mayhem. And, we're getting some interest, we're getting some traction, all these different things. But, and I'll let Nick talk about a lot of this, but we spent a lot of time talking to people directly and kind of pitching the brand directly. And very, very quickly what we realized, because when you're in this build phase, you're in kind of a silo, or at least we were, right? Not everyone is. Some people are doing the things that we learned to do from the jump. We like Nick and I kind of have to like touch the stove to see if it's hot with some of this stuff, like to learn. Like we gotta feel what people are saying. So talking to people, it would be like, cool, protein oatmeal. This name is so out there. Why is your company named this? And we always thought, oh, it's perfect that this name is going to turn heads because it's then going to lead us into telling our story, which is then going to help us acquire the customer. But the story was too many hops removed from the product itself. And it's not an energy drink. It's not beef jerky. The name essentially has nothing to do with the product in a lot of ways. And so instead of drawing people into this conversation and creating a venue for this storytelling moment, it actually became a distraction where we would go off on the tangent about our story and being in this basement gym in Manhattan and the workouts are so hard. Misery and Mayhem is, you know, the feelings that you have at the pinnacle of the workout when you want to give up. I mean, me even doing it right now feels kind of laborious, right? How do I, like, that connection to then a protein oatmeal that is actually better for you, differentiated from a nutritional standpoint, and all of these things, like it just, they became two very different compartments. And Nick, I'll pass it over to you, but basically, like, that's kind of what we started to see. That friction point is what we started to see pretty quickly. And again, we had all these ideas of how it would actually do the opposite, and then in practice, after hundreds of repetitions of telling people about this brand and product, the reaction and kind of the difficulty in connecting those dots became very clear.
Yeah, and I think too, you know, as Scott has mentioned, we are first-time founders, right? So we are building a lot of these things in a vacuum. And we used to have some sayings that we have now, right? Which is, you know, your favorite band name doesn't need to be your brand name, right? So it's like, how are you attaching your visuals and all these things? Because we're creative. We wanted to build this world, but it also, at the end of the day, what matters is sales, right? What matters is that somebody can look at your product and go, oh, I understand what this is. And also to do service by your product, right? Like, we put so much time into developing a really great recipe and a formulation that we're proud of. And a lot of the times people would look and almost think of it as a junk food. And that was the feedback we're getting. And we're like, wait, no, that's not what we made. We tried to make a better for you oatmeal. And we did, but at the end of the day, if someone's just looking at one picture on a website and they go, wait, this looks like pre-workout oatmeal, we weren't really telling the narrative through our own design. And the other thing too, as we continue to get more feedback too, is like, you know, we had this other, you know, adage, which was, you know, if you build it, they'll come. And that's just not true, right? Like, you know, you have to know, like, you know, so we're like, oh man, you need to build this. It looks so cool. And look at how. It's so funny too. On a side note, actually, we had a lot of people say to us, like, you know, was Liquid Death like a, you know, an inspiration for you guys? And honestly, it wasn't. You know, we really built this brand just because we thought it was like this, you know, we like it. And so I think what really was the turning point for us is obviously huge sales spike. And when you open this, we built up some, you know, some momentum there. But as it starts to go down, you're like, wait, what's going on here, right? And so if I'm explaining, like Scott just did, you know, the brand to you, a consumer, I'm not going to be able to explain this to them for 5 minutes every single time, right? And we actually, the defining turning point was we actually brought on 2 amazing new advisors, and they were great. And honestly, they fit our personality. They were like, we basically thought we made Misery and Mayhem for them. We're like, oh, these guys are going to love it. We can build this. They're going to get our story. And we had told them the full story a couple times. And then on our first real meeting, they go, guys, got to be honest. I have no idea what you're, I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get.
Ouch. That must have been a tough thing to hear.
You know, can I be honest? It was a relief.
It was freeing.
It was freeing because we had, to like Scott had mentioned earlier, we had been feeling this because we've been in investor pitches, feeling the weight of explanation, the weight of like, guys, this is not linking. And I think the one thing, maybe we move really fast, but Scott and I also were very good at like saying, hey, like, this has to work. You know, this we can't ride this into the dirt for our own egos. And so we were a step back, and then they said, hey guys, your brand is actually really, your product is actually really good, but this brand is just, it's just not going to work. And then that's what made us change.
Got it. So product good. We had a problem with the brand.
Yes.
Talk to me about the pivot, because from what I understand, you did this in a really short time frame and on a pretty tight budget as well. How do you yeah, tell me how that played out.
Yeah, so the rebrand. Nick and I at this point had I can't state an exact figure, but we had definitely less than $20,000 in our checking account for the business.
Hmm.
Maybe like we had very, very little money. And we did this entire rebrand in terms of the visual design and everything like that. Obviously, packaging in the new production run is a different set of funds, but we did the entire thing for about $2,500, and we again, it was this freeing moment. It cemented that we were working with the right people too, that they were straight up with us. We had a lot of people who were kind of like, okay, like who am I to say this isn't going to work, which is right. But they were kind of like, what are these guys doing? And, Nick and I, like, we, we started over completely. We came up with, I want to say, at least 50 new concepts, at least. And what we were doing is we were coming up with these ideas, and then we have a graphic designer that has done both brands, and we basically talk to her about the idea and say, can you make a mock-up of this? Can you make a mock-up of this? So on and so forth. And initially we were completely lost, right? Because you're kind of undoing everything you did with the last brand. It's a really interesting creative space to be. It's incredibly difficult because we're like, we have to rebuild this entire thing. And we don't know what the new direction is. We just know that the old direction is not what we're doing now. So we actually moved to this kind of overly neutral place for a while during the rebrand, where we were saying, okay, this just needs to be like enough fun. Stop having fun. Stop trying to be different. Just let the product tell the story of it being better for you and leave it there, and have some, nice aesthetic touches, but don't. And so we came up with all these concepts, and we're showing one of our advisors all these concepts, and they're kind of like these minimalist premium, we're like, we're going to go this minimalist premium route because our product is a little more expensive than what's currently on shelf, so on and so forth. And then we bring up this mock-up of like a Muscle Beach guy with these bright colors, and it says muscle up oatmeal and all this stuff. And it's like, it's basically a joke that we had kind of like gone along with. And I wasn't even going to show one of our advisors, and we show him and he goes, okay, this is cool. We're showing him the minimalist stuff. He's like, all right, this is cool, whatever. And Nick and I love the muscle up thing, but in between the two of us, we said, we already did this and it didn't work. We can't be different anymore. Like, we got to just play the game as it's meant to be played. And we showed him, and we showed like our spouses and other stuff, and they were like, oh, this is like incredibly attractive. And we're like, yeah, but we just did this whole kind of like out of the box thing. We can't do that again. And they go, no, well, this doesn't confuse me. If you put the bowl of oatmeal and everything in there, and like this guy, and it's fun, and it's like bright sunshine, and it's drawing me in, I'm no longer confused. We didn't have a name at this point nailed down. But anyway, so it was kind of like, and then Nick and I sat there and we said like, okay, maybe we overcorrected, and we're also working furiously with absolutely like basically no money. And so we started to go into user testing, and we tested like thousands of people, and we took this concept and we said, up against the existing brands, which one would you pick? Which one looks most interesting to you? Yeah. And then we start editing, and we do more and more testing, and then all of a sudden by the end, Misery Mayhem had like 10% of people picking the brand over the big Quaker Kodiak competitors. And then by the end, we have Dawnbreaker with the new packaging and everything, and over 65% of people are picking it over the existing brands. And that's off no notch. And then we're layering in price and macros and all this other stuff, and that data is sticking. And so anyway, I could go on forever about that, but it really was this like Nick and I having to accept other people's insight for sure, because we were so in our own world and kind of overcorrecting that our the people that we trust kind of brought us back into the middle and was like, no, you guys can still have fun and build a world and have a character and do all this stuff. It's just like, draw me in so that I know what this is in 5 seconds, but I'm also still curious, as opposed to drawing me in and I don't really know what this is. And I'm like, WTF, like, why, like, what is this thing? So anyway,
what are some of the other difficult decisions or, you know, big mistakes that you guys have made? I mean, one of the things I full transparency, one of the things I really enjoy about chatting with you guys is that you're willing to open up and chat about, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is obviously a big one, but have there been any other significant surprises or lessons learned through your first couple of years?
Yeah, so there's been so many. So it's interesting, you know.
I've got my notebook here. Let's go, Nick.
You go, you know, and it's really hard, right? Because you don't want to be also. I think it's important to not let it ruin your confidence as a founder either, right? Like as you go on this journey, it's so easy with hindsight 2020 to go, oh my God, man, what were we thinking? What were we doing? Well, the truth is at the time, they were good decisions. It wasn't like, you know, we wanted to waste money. You know, it wasn't like we tried to build things, right? But it's, you know, you're going a million miles, you know, an hour, you're trying to build this thing. You know, there's a sense of urgency on a personal level, right? With your family, you know, and like, how am I building this thing? This is becoming my full-time job. So like, how am I going to really turn this thing and grow it? And so I think one of the first lessons that we learned is that and then I'm going to let Scott take over on the deck. We'll go back and forth. One of the first ones that we learned is that in the beginning, I really do believe you need to be scrappy. And I think that we kind of, where we had come from tech and Peloton, which again was an amazing experience, it's nothing there. We kind of were insulated with kind of having the money to do objects and things that you want, right? So you're like, let's just hire this person. They'll help it and make this faster for us. Or they're an expert here. Let's just pay them. And the truth is that nobody truly can build your business the way that you can. And as much as you want to, you think, and listen, there's amazing agencies, but in the true beginning, you need to really be the ones that get your hands dirty in every single department or what you're doing. And I think that was really where. It wasn't like we wanted, you know, we were lazy by any means, but it's like, oh man, like we don't really understand how this works. Like there's got to be an expert. Well, maybe take the couple weeks and research it. Maybe you start to do this stuff and kind of like learn how this stuff goes. So I think in an effort to do this as quick as possible, you make mistakes because you're not learning things that you really need to learn and taking that extra little bit of time. So I would think that that's definitely our first things. And it's funny, even now, to how many years later, Scott? Like 2.5 years later, we've scaled back a lot. We're bringing most things now in-house.
Oh, really?
Because,
wow.
Yeah. Yep. Because we've learned now that, again, only we can really sell this brand the right way. We live in it every day. It's pretty unrealistic to expect somebody that's a part-time and to really understand what you're thinking and to be with us every day. And also from a sales perspective, your consumer in today wants to see the founder. They want to hear what they're doing. They want to be a part of it with you. I mean, you can look at amazing brands that have founders that are talking, like, you know, we always talk about like Midday Squares, for example. They're an amazing brand.
Great example.
Just such a good example of like that whole journey. And so that's why that works. If we're just sitting behind like the curtain, it's not as impactful. So that's the other thing too, is like we are trying to take a lot more ownership of our own business.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Sorry, go ahead, Nate.
I was going to say, anything to add? You go for it.
No, just I mean, there's an immense amount of patience that this requires, and a lot of people, Nick and I included, are not exactly patient all the time. So like, you know, whatever you think is going to happen, basically, you got to double or triple that timeline. And your business does not care about all the environmental factors. So, you know, when we launched Misery Mayhem in February of last year, 2025, I had a 3-month-old. And when we launched Dawnbreaker at the end of September, Nick has a 3.5-month-old. We both had kids during the same time as we're building this business.
It's equitable, I guess.
You know, we're both not, you know, we don't have enough money to pay ourselves all this stuff. And that's not like, oh, poor us.
Yeah.
We fully made
Mm-hmm.
that decision and signed up for this and could have easily, you know, gone another direction or whatever. But it's like all of that, and it's just context that isn't relevant to the business. Like the patience that's required to build this thing one customer at a time is still the same reality. And I think that when you are working, you know, in your career and you kind of look at the entrepreneur path or whatever it is, or building your own company, you know, you get these sound bites of it that are not always completely realistic, right? And like, you know, Nick and I, frankly, just dove into this thing head first. We didn't go take a course or go to business school or something like that. And again, that's not saying like, oh, we're better than anyone who did. It's actually the opposite. Like it's probably helpful to do that. But yeah, you have to be incredibly patient. And I think that's the biggest lesson that I've learned overall is like my expectations need to be lowered significantly in order to push this thing in the right way. Because when I start getting impatient and when I start and things aren't moving fast enough for me and I can't kind of like surrender to the process of building this business, then you really get in your own way. And that's more problematic than any operational mess up or like bad hire or whatever it is. So yeah, I'd say that like in terms of like mistakes made, I'd say like I just came into this thing super impatient. I wanted results, I wanted sales, I wanted to be a guy with a company, and it's like, you know, you're running an adult lemonade stand for the first, you know, couple years of this thing, and if you're not okay with that, then don't do it, because the chances of you making $100,000 in your first month or whatever, like it wouldn't even be possible for us to do that. We don't have enough inventory. We don't have the cash flow for it. Like, lower your expectations. So anyway.
So then, you know, not sending yourself prematurely bankrupt.
Yeah, that's a great question. Every decision is a calculated risk, right? So, you know, no matter what, you're rolling the dice, whether you're gonna spend less or spend more, and Nick and I actually, you know, we face these decision points constantly. We're going through one right now. We, you know, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but we're focused on e-com, and our site isn't really built for conversion optimization right now, and so we need to rebuild parts of our site, and evaluating that decision and how scrappy we can be. I think it's really about, instead of looking at the shiny object of the agency or the solution where you equate, well, if I'm spending this many dollars, the ROI must be really good. We've kind of over time flipped the script and said, okay, how little can I spend and still get some ROI and chip away at that and kind of prove it out in these, like, you know, one little step at a time, as opposed to trying to constantly jump forward 10 steps, if that makes sense, by bringing in, you know, such and such partner to accelerate that work. Again, it comes back to the patience. It's kind of like, I need to see tangible results at the lowest level, and then I'm going to grow really intentionally and control that cash flow, as opposed to, let me push more chips in than I'm comfortable with. But hey, if this bet pays off, it's really gonna, you know, it's gonna be amazing. It's like, no, like I need to be putting in a small amount of capital very deliberately and having as much of my hands in the process as possible, learning as I go. And then once I get some proof of that, then I can start to spend a little more. It's working. Maybe then I can evaluate a new partner, or it's worth bringing this person in on a small retainer or whatever it is. But everything needs to come from like me essentially like scrubbing the floor and seeing if it's actually removing like the gum that's stuck on it that I'm trying to get off, as opposed to seeing a flyer for $100 cleaner that's going to remove it instantly and nothing happens. So, you know,
for a product like this long term, I would assume that eventually we're going to be looking at retail. But talk to me about that decision. Why e-com? Why have you chosen to prioritize that early on?
Yeah, so the decision to really focus on e-com is it's tied to everything that we've talked about so far, frankly.
Hmm.
And you know, we just launched the brand. Um, we're in about 15 plus retail stores, not very many. We do well at those
Hmm.
retail stores, but um, with the cash flow and the product availability and the inventory and just what we have on hand, that's how we can incrementally maximize our footprint by seeing what messaging works with customers, getting as much feedback as quickly as possible, really owning
Hmm.
that entire funnel for the customer so that we can have the data and again interact with the people that are buying it and then see where the consumer behavior is so that when we eventually do want to push into retail, we have brand awareness, we have confidence, we're not pushing all those chips in and saying, oh my gosh, some big nationwide brand wants to do a deal with us and we're like a moth to the flame, but we take on all of that downside. If we don't perform for one reason or another, just on the selling side, it doesn't really hurt that retailer, right? They take us off the shelf after 3 months or whatever it is, and they say, "Hey, see you in a few years. We're gonna fill it back up the way it was, and we're good."
Yeah.
But for
Yeah.
us, it's a giant bet from a capital perspective on the demos, the slotting fees, the distribution, the margin that the distributor is going to take, everything like that. We have to ramp up our inventory, kind of all these things where, with D2C, we can say, okay, we're putting this much into advertisement spend. Here are all the metrics around that. We can look at all the metrics of our ads themselves and how they're performing. We can look at the metrics of our site and how that's performing. We can incrementally tune these things up for a small amount of capital, and then we can get some efficiency in this machine to where we're saying, hey, we're bringing people in for this cost, and we get them to subscribe or whatever it is, and we're breaking even after this point. So like the the foundations of the business right now are best served to be focused on ecom because we can do small inventory runs. We can kind of like, it's just more malleable. And then also on that front, the business itself, but also just for us, like getting it into people's hands and immediately seeing where these people are and what the demographic is, because you only know so much about your consumer, right, until you start selling this stuff. So
Sure.
it's kind of twofold there for us. Nikki, I don't know what you want to add to that, but I'd say it's a lot of different reasons.
I think, yeah, the only thing that I'll add is just exactly on the customer part, right? Your customer is everything, right? And so this might be
Yeah.
a cliche, and I'm sure a lot of other founders talk about this, but having access to a customer, having that feedback from them, being able to email them, being able to, if you get their SMS, text them,
Huge.
being
Yeah.
able to build that, to reach out. I mean, building that community is invaluable, right? And
Yeah.
so like being able to, so we do a trial, for example, right now, right? $7, you can try 2 of our pouches. When we ship that to you, we ship that with my business card or Scott's business card in it. And we also ship a
Yeah.
nice like thank you note and like another little touch point.
Yeah.
I think that when you think about the amount of products that are out there, the amount of ads, the amount of different types of, literally just products and things that people buy, having a touch point, especially when you're small like we are, is just incredible. And then then people start to talk about you. We also do a ton of like, DMing and things that we can, even with new followers, and trying to reach out and gifting. And again, we can get into the gifting strategies. You can't give away all your inventory for free, but in doing
Yeah.
so, you start to slowly build this fire, and it does come back to patience, right? It's not going to be overnight.
Yeah.
But that's way better than you're just in a shelf and you got to hope for the best. And I
Yeah.
can't talk to that person. I want somebody at least at our scale to say, no, I've spoken to Nick, I've spoken to Scott. They're good guys, because that
Yeah.
NPS, or your net promoter score, is just epic. That's really what honestly built Peloton in a lot of ways when we were there, and that's really what we're banking on here, right? Is like, hey, I'm using Dawnbreaker. I've actually know those guys, and then you can build that community.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, totally agree. I think you've given some fantastic reasons. It makes a lot of sense. I want to talk a little bit about the unit economics of all this. you guys have both come from Peloton, which is, a subscription-oriented business, very different unit economics to what you're doing now. Are you able to share, like, what are some of the unit economics and numbers that you're looking for from this ecom business, and how far away are you from achieving them?
I mean, I think when it comes to unit economics, like just on how much it costs to acquire a customer and kind of what keeping them on entails and everything like that, we're definitely um, really pushing on the subscription model.
Hmm.
One, because it's logical. The consumer behavior of something for something like oatmeal is people will eat it at least a few times a week if it's a part of their breakfast routine, and so that's really what we try to capitalize on and kind of bake in there. Is this is an easy routine, like, it's funny because it started out with Nick and I wanting to make this product because we're in the gym and all the athletic stuff around it. And then since we've had kids, it's actually taken on this whole other shape, because, it's easy for parents. And so for us, it's really about becoming profitable on a given customer, at least after the first month that they're subscribed. And so the way
Hmm.
that it works with our trial, for example, is they pay for the trial, they pay $7, that's including shipping. We typically lose a couple bucks on the trial, depending on the shipping zone and stuff like that. And then it auto subscribes them. And we have over 50% of people stay on that subscription past the first month. And so then
Hmm.
they're being subscribed to a 15 pack per month. And so the customer acquisition costs that we currently have, I mean, it varies. We've only been running ads for a couple months, but let's just say it's, about $30, 25 to $30. We're not
Hmm.
spending a whole lot on ads, but that that trial pays itself off after the first month. And then if the person continues to stay subscribed, which a lot of people do, then
Hmm.
we're just making profit on that customer from there.
Yeah.
And so if the math there works, it's successful for us, right? So it's
Yeah.
constantly pumping new creative into Meta, figuring out how do we talk to our customer, what customer is interested in buying this the most, and that's where we just started running like founder ads alongside stills and all this other stuff and testimonials. But and then running full size ads too, right? So
Yeah.
if someone wants to come in and buy the 10 pack, which is the minimum on our website, we're good there as long as we're making back the ad money on the first time purchase as long as the customer acquisition cost is lower than $30 basically. So
Okay.
um, I hope I'm answering your question, the for what you were looking for, but like
Yeah.
the economics of the ecom site, like really that's what we're, and then obviously again the subscribers is really what we're focused on because that's the ARR where we're saying, hey, if we basically turn the lights off on acquiring new customers, here's how much revenue we're doing, just
Yeah.
based off the subs. So
Yeah. Yep. I get it. I get it. Cool. Let's talk about financing. So I know you guys have raised, I think, a few hundred thousand already, and I understand you've made a significant amount of progress in your second round. You mentioned off air that I think you've done 250 of about a $300,000 goal. I'm curious, what are the biggest surprises for you so far through the fundraising process?
um Nick, I don't know if you want to take this one or I'm happy to, but
Yeah, no. I mean, I guess it probably helped us take us to the beginning, right? And some of those other maybe mistakes, right? I think that's probably what everyone wants to hear too. So, um, when we some of the bigger surprises with us on fundraising in general is that it's not just like you're packaging a story and a dream, right? Like I think modern,
Hmm.
maybe a few years ago, we kept hearing about this like golden age of CPG, right? Where you were able to, hey, here's my idea. You don't even have a sample yet, but I think this can really, do well. And investors are like, oh, okay, let's do that. And I think at least what we've experienced, and again, I don't want to overgeneralize, is that has changed, that has shifted, right? So I think a lot of specifically institutional investors, but even to some angels, want to see velocity, right? They want to see some PMF. They want to see something that's like, okay, guys, even if they love your product and like love what we're doing, like us. So I think for us, that was one early surprise where it's like, oh, wow, like we've, one of the things that we did is we paid to have this great deck made, right? And we paid, we bootstrapped the sampling part out of our own money, right? Like, let's get some samples of this stuff. I think if we have samples and this, how could we lose? And the truth is that doesn't really matter, because the final questions are always going to be, what does traction look like? What are you doing? Yeah. Like, what is, whether it's return customer, and if you don't have your AOV, if you don't have your conversion rates, if you don't have your CAC, if you don't have, investors are like, hey, all right, cool, I'll see you guys when you do. Right. So I think for us right now, as we continue to get better at this, we also have learned too that the narrative also changes depending on investors too, right? I think a lot of the time we would like just go on and on and on a little bit too much. We've kind of gotten a little bit better about that. And a lot of the time it's like, get to the hits and let them ask questions, right? Maybe an investor actually wants to learn more about, no, let's get into your unit economics more. And then you get other investors that are actually much more interested, is like, no, tell me a little bit about your brand strategy and how you plan on growing on Instagram, right? So I think for anybody that's starting to fundraise, and I've actually had people ask me this, is you need to be very malleable, nimble, and like kind of, it's not like one size fits all approach at least in our, I guess I can speak to myself experience. It's very like, who are you talking to? What's that? And the last thing too is that you'll hear a lot of VC firms say like they do pre-revenue businesses. A lot of the time that just doesn't end up being the case. They still want to see that you've got at least $500,000 in revenue coming in for that year. And so they'll say like, oh, we do some pre-rev, and so you'll get excited, you'll get a meeting, and then it's like at the end of it, it's like, I still need to see something moving, guys. So I think that, I guess the header of this conversation is patience. That's definitely the patience part, where it's like, okay, and I think one of the things that we've really focused on, though, is building relationships with investors. So that's something we continue to do all the time. So we always try to meet with new angels. We always try to meet with new institutions. And hey, once we start to hit the metrics that they're looking for, at least we have warm versus like just sending out when we're finally ready and then starting to build. We've got an investor that we've known now the entire journey, that I really think at one point we're hopefully going to work together one day, but we have to check that last revenue.
Yeah. Box. I hear you. So what has been the most common numbers or financial metrics that people have cared about or wanted to talk about in these investor conversations?
Yeah, I'd say that it obviously depends on what type of investor you're talking to. I think what Nick said is absolutely true in that business fundamentals are paramount. Social traction, the vibe of your brand, even the product itself, like all this other stuff, like is icing and decoration and all this stuff. Like business fundamentals is the number one thing. We see that as a common thread all the way down to very small angel investors, frankly, because that's kind of become the culture more than anything. The culture isn't as much like, oh my God, this is like a viral sensation rocket ship, jump on it, unless it's maybe celebrity led. If you're normal guys like Nick and I, having this bright, cool packaging and all this stuff is for the customer. The investor is not, they'll comment on it if they like it, but it's just not as relevant. I'd say that, it's really total revenue. I'd say $1 million in revenue is for a lot of investors, the earliest institutional investors, $1 million in revenue is definitely the like, you must be this tall to ride this ride kind of thing. I think people are asking a lot about return customer rate. What's your CAC? How much is your ad spend? Just what's your burn like? And then scaling margins too, because when you look at a company like ours and a category like ours, you want to make sure that, look, retail expansion, unless we're a unicorn in the e-com space, retail expansion is going to ultimately, in most cases be what leads to a lot bigger revenue numbers, more growth, kind of like that Series B stage company that you see, like someone with like Saws or something like that. and these companies that are doing really well. So they want to make sure that your scaling margins and your unit economics are rock solid, and that this is something that's financially viable, and you're not just going to get killed on margin and sell a bunch of product that basically nets you next to nothing when you pile it on top of all of the other overhead. And then just for the meantime, it's like, how many customers are you retaining? Are your ads effective? Are you converting people? And like, is there truly a customer that's looking for this? Is your PMF thesis sound? You know, so I know that was like a lot of different things, but business fundamentals, more than hype and cool brand and oh my god, it tastes so good. It all comes back to like, are you doing the basics and the fundamentals really well? Because everything else can be manipulated at the end of the day.
Sure. Okay. Let's talk about the future here. So last time we spoke, I'm not sure if it's still the case, but last time we spoke, you guys mentioned that you haven't been paying yourselves thus far. Looking ahead, what needs to happen in order for you to be able to do that? And how, what's the plan for getting there?
What needs to happen is that the $250,000 that we just raised needs to work. The bets that we are taking right now need to work. The going all in on e-com, the doubling down on social content, the doubling down on ad performance and revamping our site and converting more customers and everything like that. Fundamentally, like, those numbers need to be what we expect, and our site needs to perform, because those are those business fundamentals that we have a Boy Scout fire version of that right now. Like, we have these little embers coming off where it's like, oh, our numbers are solid right now. Like, this is actually looking good. We're actually getting traction. We now need to scale that up with this $250,000 to prove that out, so that there is this story for this kind of next level beyond friends and family of investors that are looking for that. Because it's enough capital that we can actually prove that out. And we can just prove it out if we do it right. So, Nick, I don't know what you want to add to that, but that's the road. And yeah, we haven't, it is incredibly stressful. And again, no one made us do this. This isn't complaining. This is just reality, is that Nick and I have been working on this business for 2.5 years. We have families, we have bills to pay and all this stuff. And there does come a point where you can't just do this forever and not pay yourself. We absolutely have to make this work so that we can get up to that next rung of angel investors and bring in another chunk of money that we can then allocate ourselves some kind of salary from.
I hear you. So there's a lot riding on this. You've both got, partners and kids now that you need to support, but you have a chunk of money in the bank and need to be very, very careful, I guess, and strategic in thinking about the bets that you're placing and the returns that you're going to generate from this. One thing I recall about being a founder when I was in your seat, scaling a business like this, is that there was almost this I was almost constantly plagued with feeling like I should be doing more than what I was. And there's always like 10 times more priorities and ideas and shiny objects to chase than there were hours in the day to do them and money in the bank to be able to afford to do them. How do you guys deal with that? How do you think about prioritization and picking the battles that you want to fight?
I think for us we're getting better at this, and I think that's the first step. And Nate, you nailed it, man. We literally what you just said this yesterday. There's just not enough hours in the day, right? So that's the first thing. So on that part, like, it is very hard to you got to avoid burnout. You also have to make sure that you're present at home too, right? And you got to make sure that you're present with each other, right? So Scott and I spend more time with Scott than I do with my wife, right? So it's the facts, right? So it's like, you have to, when you're a new founder too, like it starts to creep into certain definitely level of obsession, right? Like what else can I do? What else? Right. So I think we check each other. We try to work on that. We do try to take our own breaks. We try to give ourselves at least some weekend days, to just kind of like to realign on that front. But on the bets part, to answer specifically your question, that's really why we decided to go into e-com, right? And just focus here now. It starts to take out this other noise. The thing is that when you're new at this, every opportunity sounds like it's going to be your lotto ticket. So it's so easy to just hear like lottery ticket. Yes, I have an opportunity to be here. Actual exact example, we were just asked to pitch and potentially have a good shot at being in the Sprouts Forager program, where we could be, you have to win, pitch, whatever. But if we were to get that, oh my God, man, we'd have we'd be in this many stores. But when we actually took a step back and thought about it, we're like, we're not even ready for that if we wanted. We couldn't handle the cash burn of demoing. We couldn't handle just upkeeping that. It would require our entire inventory bet to be in a Sprout. It's like, so that for us at that time, I think a year ago, we probably would have said, we'll figure it out later. And now we're much more taking a step back of like, okay, hang on. And so our bets now, though, are building a very good house foundation, right? That's what we're trying. Right. So it's like, all right, take that. So instead of just like having a 250,000 person influencer post a couple times for us, what actually do we need for this money? No, we need to make sure our emails are way better. That's a really good spend, really good use of energy. Let's take a look at our site. Is our site optimized to do exactly what we want it to do? No, it is not. That's a really good use of our money, right? And also looking at what I mentioned earlier is what are we currently outsourcing that we can bring in-house? So for us, that was content. We had worked in this is nothing. We actually had a great firm that we were working with, but the truth is that Scott and I can move that needle a lot more. So we're like, hey, let's save the money here because it's better to put it in more sales focused things and to try to, to build that. So I think we always have this thing in the back, we always have this, we always say, how is this moving the sales needle? Right? What is that doing here versus like, what's a nice to have and what's like a need to have? A better website that converts is a much nicer to have than an influencer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you just have to mature as a business owner. It's like when the runway, when you first start, it's kind of like this super it's like there's a, not that there isn't still a ton of excitement. There's more excitement than ever before, honestly. But like as your runway gets shorter, it's just, hey, I have to question my initial thought. Nick and I have to question our initial gut reactions to something and really sit with it and be like, I can't afford to be impulsive or jumpy or reactive to things. Like every single decision is whether this thing lives another couple months or not at this point. So it's like, when you're sitting pre-launch and it's kind of like this notional world and eventually and whatever, it's like, no, like the cows have come home and like this is our window of opportunity to execute this business or not, right? And so that's that reality definitely is in front of us every single day.
Cool. Well, kudos to the two of you for the growth path that you've been on here and the approach that you're taking to it. I do hope you figure it all out. I said this before, but I'm going to say it again now. One of the things I really appreciate and enjoy about chatting with you guys is just your honesty and willing to share the reality of some of the decisions that we have to make as founders and what it takes to build a business like this. So I do really sincerely appreciate your willingness to come on and have this conversation with me. So thank you. I guess we've already gone a little bit over on time here, so I want to look to wrap things up here. Where should people go if they'd like to learn a little bit more about you guys, either personally or the business?
I'd say the best place to go right now is Dawnbreaker Oats on Instagram. We are really ramping up content there, and you can learn about the brand, you can learn about the product, You can hopefully be entertained by some fun stuff there as well. But I'd say that our Instagram honestly is kind of right now like the hub of the brand that we're building on. So
Okay, perfect. We'll check it out. Well, guys, thank you again for coming on. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you. I've learned so much from talking to you, and wishing you nothing but success in 2026 and beyond. Thanks again.
Thanks, Nate.
Thanks, Nate. Appreciate it.